There is a specific moment of anticipation when you unbox a new computer. You press the power button, the manufacturer logo fades, and the operating system prepares to welcome you. For over 3 decades, this moment culminated in a simple, fundamental question. What would you like your username to be? You typed a name, created a password, and the machine was yours. It was a localized private transaction between you and the hardware sitting on your desk. But if you have purchased a new Windows PC recently, you already know that this moment has fundamentally changed. The simple prompt for a local username has been replaced by a mandatory demand for an email address, an internet connection, and a cloud-based identity. Across technical forums, privacy communities, and IT help desks, a growing sense of urgency is spreading. Longtime users are noticing that the traditional offline Windows account, the bedrock of personal computing for generations, is becoming increasingly difficult to create, harder to maintain, and seemingly targeted for eventual obsolescence. The question being asked is no longer just about how to bypass the setup screen. The question is whether Microsoft is quietly, systematically phasing out the fully offline PC experience entirely. And if the ability to use a computer without tethering it to a corporate cloud identity disappears, what does that mean for the very concept of owning your hardware? To understand the magnitude of this shift, we must first define exactly what an offline account is and why it has been the default standard for personal computing since its inception. In technical terms, a local or offline account in Windows relies on the Security Account Manager, or SAM. The SAM is a critical database file stored locally on your computer's hard drive, specifically within the Windows System 32 configuration directory. When you create a local account, your username and a cryptographically hashed version of your password are stored exclusively in this local database. When you type your password at the login screen, the operating system hashes your input and compares it to the hash stored in the SAM. If they match, you are granted access. This entire authentication process happens locally on the silicon of your machine without a single packet of data being transmitted over the internet. This local authentication model was the foundation of Windows NT, Windows 2000, Windows XP, and Windows 7. It treated the personal computer as an island. Your machine did not need to communicate with a central server to verify who you were. This architecture provided several distinct advantages that many users still fiercely defend today. The first is absolute privacy. Because your credentials and your login events never leave the device, there is no central corporate ledger tracking when you log in, what device you're using, or how frequently you access your machine. Your digital identity, at least at the operating system level, remains entirely anonymous to the software vendor. The second advantage is simplicity and reliability. A local account does not depend on external infrastructure. If your internet connection goes down, if Microsoft's authentication servers experience an outage, or if a submarine cable is severed, your ability to log into your computer is completely unaffected. The machine answers only to you. The third advantage is control. If you forget your local password, the recovery process, while sometimes technically demanding, relies on local tools, bootable recovery media, or administrator overrides. You are not at the mercy of an automated account recovery bot, a 2-factor authentication prompt sent to a lost phone, or a corporate trust and safety algorithm that might lock your account due to suspicious activity. For power users, privacy advocates, and those operating in secure or isolated environments, the offline account is not merely a preference. It is a requirement. It represents the fundamental principle that the hardware you purchased with your own money should operate independently of the manufacturer's ongoing services. It is the digital equivalent of a physical key to a house you own. You do not need to call the builder every time you want to unlock your front door. But as Windows has evolved, this concept of local, independent ownership has increasingly conflicted with the modern software industry's vision of how computing should work. The transition away from the offline account did not happen overnight. It was a gradual, multi-stage evolution that began in earnest with Windows 8. Microsoft, observing the massive success of Apple's ecosystem and the rise of cloud computing, recognized that the future of software was not in standalone products sold in retail boxes, but in connected services tied to user identities. Windows 8 introduced the Microsoft account, allowing users to log in with an email address and sync their settings, apps, and preferences across multiple devices. However, in those early days, the local account remained the prominent default option. The Microsoft account was presented as an alternative for those who wanted cloud features. With Windows 10, the pressure shifted significantly. Microsoft began heavily incentivizing the use of online accounts. During the setup process, the user interface was redesigned to make the Microsoft account option large, colorful, and easy to select, while the option to create a local account was reduced to small, easily overlooked text links buried at the bottom of the screen. This is a classic example of dark pattern design, using interface manipulation to guide user behavior without technically removing the choice. Windows 10 also introduced deep integrations with OneDrive, the Microsoft Store, and cross-device synchronization, all of which required an online identity to function. Yet, the local account remained fully supported and accessible, particularly for users installing the Pro or Enterprise editions. Windows 11, however, marked a definitive turning point. For the first time, the Home edition of Windows completely removed the visible option to create a local account during the standard out-of-box experience, or OOBE. The setup flow is hard-coded to require an active internet connection and a valid Microsoft account. If the system detected that it was offline, the setup process would simply halt, refusing to proceed until a network connection was established. This was a profound architectural and philosophical shift. The operating system was no longer just asking for your credentials. It was demanding proof of your connection to Microsoft's cloud infrastructure before it would even allow you to reach the desktop. This push toward online accounts is inextricably linked to the broader integration of cloud services and artificial intelligence within the modern Windows ecosystem. Features like OneDrive, folder backup, which automatically redirects your local desktop, documents, and pictures folders to the cloud, rely entirely on an authenticated online identity. The synchronization of your clipboard, your browser history in Microsoft Edge, and your system settings across multiple devices all require a central cloud profile to act as the intermediary. Furthermore, the recent aggressive integration of AI features, such as Copilot, fundamentally assumes a cloud-connected identity. AI assistants require massive computational resources and access to cloud-based large language models. To provide a personalized, continuous experience, the AI needs to know who you are, what your preferences are, and what your digital footprint looks like across Microsoft services. An anonymous, offline local account provides none of this context. In the modern Windows architecture, the local account is increasingly treated not as a valid alternative, but as a degraded legacy state that prevents the operating system from delivering its full, intended cloud-connected experience. IT professionals and privacy advocates has engaged in a continuous cat-and-mouse game to bypass these restrictions. This ongoing struggle is the primary source of the current anxiety surrounding the future of offline accounts. When Windows 11 first launched without a visible local account option, the community quickly discovered workarounds. The most famous was the command prompt bypass. By pressing Shift plus F10 during the setup screen to open a terminal and typing a specific command like ob/bypass NRO, users could force the system to restart and reveal the hidden offline account option. For a time, this method worked flawlessly. It was widely shared across forums, YouTube tutorials, and IT deployment guides. But with subsequent cumulative updates, Microsoft began patching these bypasses. The command was disabled in newer builds. The community then pivoted to other methods, such as entering a locked or banned email address into the Microsoft account login field. This would cause the authentication server to throw a specific error, which the setup flow would interpret as a failure, subsequently falling back to the local account creation screen. Once again, this workaround spread rapidly. And once again, Microsoft updated the setup servers to recognize and block these specific dummy addresses, closing the loophole. This cycle of discovery and patching has created a profound sense of unease. Users are not just frustrated by the initial restriction, they are deeply concerned by the deliberate ongoing effort required to maintain the restriction. Every time a new bypass is discovered, it feels less like a permanent solution, more like a temporary stay of execution. The underlying fear is that eventually, Microsoft will patch the final loophole, hard-coding the online requirement at a kernel or firmware level, making it impossible to install Windows without a Microsoft account. Beyond the technical workarounds, there's a deeper, more philosophical worry regarding dependence on cloud identity systems. When your ability to log into your physical computer is tied to a remote server, you are introducing a massive external point of failure into your daily life. We have all experienced internet outages, but with an offline account, an internet outage merely restricts your web browsing. With a mandatory online account, an internet outage or a Microsoft server failure could theoretically lock you out of your own hardware. Furthermore, there is the risk of account termination. Microsoft's terms of service grant the company the right to suspend or terminate accounts that violate their policies. While this is typically applied to email and cloud storage, users worry about the implications of a unified identity. If an automated moderation bot flags your Microsoft account for a perceived violation, and that account is the sole key to your Windows login, you could be locked out of your local machine. It is crucial to separate verified technical realities from internet exaggeration. Microsoft has not yet completely deleted the local account code from the Windows kernel. The underlying architecture still supports it, but they have systematically removed every legitimate, user-friendly pathway to access it, signaling a clear intent to make the offline account a relic of the past. To view this transition solely as a corporate power grab is to ignore the complex, legitimate technical and security challenges that Microsoft is attempting to solve. The preference for online accounts is not driven merely by a desire for data collection or ecosystem lock-in. It is deeply rooted in the modern realities of cybersecurity and enterprise management. The traditional local account, relying on a user-generated password stored in a local SAM database, is fundamentally vulnerable in today's threat landscape. Local passwords are highly susceptible to brute force attacks, credential stuffing, and physical extraction. If a malicious actor gains physical access to a laptop, or if malware achieves administrative privileges, they can dump the SAM file and use offline cracking tools to extract the password hash. Once cracked, the attacker has total control over the machine. Microsoft accounts, by contrast, leverage modern, cloud-based authentication protocols, most notably FIDO2 and WebAuthn. These protocols enable passwordless authentication through Windows Hello, tying your biometric data, like your fingerprint or facial recognition, to a cryptographic key stored securely in the device's TPM, the Trusted Platform Module. When you log in with a Microsoft account in Windows Hello, the actual authentication happens locally via the TPM, but the trust is anchored in the cloud. This allows for rapid, secure revocation. If your laptop is stolen, you can log into Microsoft's website from another device and instantly revoke the stolen device's access to your account. The thief cannot bypass this by simply booting into safe mode, because the cryptographic trust is tied to your cloud identity and the specific hardware TPM. From a pure security standpoint, cloud-anchored identity is vastly superior to local password hashes. Additionally, online accounts solve the catastrophic problem of local password loss. In a purely offline environment, if a user forgets their local administrator password and has not created a password reset disk, the data on that machine is effectively gone. Recovering it requires booting from external media, mounting the drive, and manually editing registry hives, a process far beyond the capabilities of the average consumer. With a Microsoft account, password recovery is as simple as clicking a link, receiving a code on a secondary phone number or email, and resetting the credential from any web browser. For a company supporting over 1 billion active Windows devices, reducing the volume of lost data support calls is a massive operational priority. There is also the undeniable business imperative of ecosystem integration and subscription models. Microsoft's financial future relies heavily on recurring revenue from services like Microsoft 365, Xbox Game Pass, and OneDrive storage expansions. An online account removes the friction from these services. When a user is already authenticated at the operating system level, upselling a 1 terabyte OneDrive plan or a Game Pass subscription requires only a single click, rather than a lengthy account creation and billing setup process. Furthermore, the telemetry and diagnostic data tied to a specific Microsoft account allows Microsoft to track hardware compatibility, identify widespread software bugs, and tailor the user experience with a level of precision that anonymous, offline, local accounts simply cannot provide. Microsoft's reasoning is technically sound and economically rational, even if it fundamentally alters the user's relationship with their hardware. The friction surrounding Windows accounts is ultimately a symptom of a much larger industry-wide transformation in the nature of personal computing. We are witnessing the transition from standalone, offline-first machines to identity-linked, cloud-first ecosystems. In the early days of the PC revolution, the computer was a self-contained tool. You bought the hardware, you bought the software, and the interaction ended there. The value was entirely localized. Today, the hardware is increasingly viewed by manufacturers as merely a terminal, a physical conduit for accessing a much more valuable cloud-based digital identity. This shift toward identity-linked computing means that your digital life is no longer tied to a specific piece of silicon, but to a centralized profile that follows you across devices. You can sit down at a completely new, unconfigured laptop, log in with your cloud credentials, and within minutes, your wallpaper, your files, your browser history, and your application settings will materialize from the cloud. This is a remarkably convenient, almost magical experience for the modern multi-device user. But it requires a fundamental surrender of local autonomy. The device is no longer the primary repository of your digital life. The cloud is. The local machine is just a temporary cache. As operating systems evolve to become more deeply integrated with artificial intelligence, this dependence on cloud identity will only intensify. AI agents require vast amounts of contextual data to function effectively. They need to know your calendar, your email contents, your file structures, and your browsing habits to provide proactive assistance. This level of deep systemic integration is practically impossible to achieve securely and seamlessly with a fragmented offline local account. The AI needs a unified, cloud-verified identity to act as the central hub for your digital context. This raises profound questions about the future of digital ownership and user autonomy. If your operating system requires a continuous, authenticated handshake with a remote corporate server to function optimally, or even to boot at all, the traditional concept of owning your computer becomes highly ambiguous. You own the physical plastic, glass, and silicon, but you do not own the environment in which it operates. You are essentially leasing access to a managed ecosystem, subject to the terms of service, the privacy policies, and the ongoing operational stability of the vendor. We are slowly moving toward a paradigm where the fully offline, standalone PC is no longer a supported consumer product, but a niche, enterprise, or enthusiast configuration. Just as modern smartphones are virtually unusable without tying them to an Apple ID or a Google account, the personal computer is following the exact same trajectory. The convenience of seamless syncing, robust security, and AI integration is being used to justify the systematic removal of local control. The debate over offline accounts is not just about a login screen. It is about whether the future of computing will still allow for true, independent, offline-first functionality, or if every device we own will forever remain tethered to the cloud. The gradual disappearance of the offline Windows account is not a sudden policy change, nor is it a temporary experiment. It is the logical conclusion of a decades-long shift in how the technology industry views the personal computer. The machine on your desk is no longer just a calculator or a typewriter. It is a node in a vast, interconnected, cloud-based network. Microsoft's push toward mandatory online accounts reflects a reality where security, convenience, and artificial intelligence all demand a centralized, verified identity. But in solving the problems of the modern digital landscape, we are quietly sacrificing the foundational principle of the PC era, the absolute unmediated control of the user over their own hardware. The real issue is not merely that creating a local account has become difficult. The real issue is that the entire architecture of modern operating systems is being redesigned to make the offline experience feel broken, incomplete, and obsolete. As we accept the convenience of cloud syncing and AI assistance, we must recognize the trade-off we are making. We are trading the independence of the standalone machine for the managed security of the corporate ecosystem. And as the final bypasses are patched and the offline option fades into history, we are left with a lingering, inescapable question. In a future where our devices cannot function without the permission of a remote server, will our computers truly belong to us? Or will we simply be renting access to the platforms that manage them